What happens when somebody who has not seen Star Wars before encounters the movie that broke the fandom and launched 1,000 video essays? Let's find out.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Welcome back. We are back. The Out of the Storm podcast. Let's just get straight into it, man. What are we doing, Daniel?
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. We've made our way through the first 7 Star Wars movies, and now we're up to episode 8, The Last Jedi, which Hervé and I have seen before, and you, Jonathan, have just seen for the first time. So what's your overall impressions of the movie?
It's kind of got me confused. Firstly, I think Act 3 was probably the most memorable part for me. I think Act 1 and Act 2, not so much. In comparison to all the other Star Wars I've seen, I'd probably say it was the least memorable. I think it was kind of like all over the place, I'll be honest with you. It felt like there wasn't really much happening, as in, like, it didn't feel like the stakes were high enough. You know, Rhea was training, and obviously there was the mystery behind who the hell she was, which was the underwhelming part. When I actually found out who she was pretty much a nobody, and I was like, oh, okay. That kind of disappointed me, that she was a nobody. I thought there was something. I didn't want it to be like, of course, like everyone's always like, you know, with, like, when we found out Luke was Anakin's father, and then obviously Kylo is Han's son, and I get it, there's a lot of the revelations have been big and the relations have been family related, so I understand why they never went, you know, that route with Rhea and made her like some sort of relative, but still there could have been like a different, like there could have been something, like maybe a law, like she could have been related to or had some sort of link to another iconic character within the franchise. Like, it could have been something, because I don't know, her just being like a nobody just made it less anticlimactic for me, when obviously there was that big reveal, which kind of disappointed me. But
what did you want it to be? So you just said you expected there to be some kind of connection to
someone,
some major character, like,
yes.
After episode 7 came out and before this movie came out, there was about 2 years worth of speculation about who the parents might be, and it was everybody from Obi-Wan to she's a Skywalker to just about every possibility had been pitched at some point. And then this movie comes along and says, no, she's nobody. So that surprised you and also wasn't satisfying to you?
No, I can't say it surprised me. I get why they did it, and I get what type of effect it has. But at the same time, what I can say is I just wasn't satisfied by it. I just wanted to kind of like build to something, and for it to build to nothing, I was like, oh. It's like, you know, it's like, oh.
Yeah. Does it build to nothing, or is there a story here, right? Because Kylo Ren is also defined by his heritage, right? He's the grandson of Darth Vader. He's the son of Leia, who it's kind of implied was one of the great political leaders after the Republic was rebuilt, right? So he comes from like political royalty in a way, right? And he lets his life be entirely be dominated by who his family is, right? And who his ancestors were. And then Rey comes along, and it is implied that her parents are somebody important, and it's kind of promised that there's a big reveal, and then it comes out as, well, then they're nobody. Does that make for an interesting story, you think?
50-50. Before I even get to my 50-50, I think Hervé wants to say something.
No, I was going to say, like, because it seemed like what they were kind of possibly trying to do was, with this movie, was show that anyone could be Force user. I mean, you've seen in the previous movies how many different like Jedis and stuff like that were in the movies. But it seemed like it could have possibly opened up a different future for Star Wars in terms of like having new stories about people that aren't related to the Skywalkers and aren't related to the Skywalker saga. So
yeah,
in terms of like that direction, I kind of understand it. But like Daniel said, I was part of the 2 years of people speculating and, you know, online videos and this, that, and the other, trying to figure out exactly who Rey's parents were. So knowing that, extremely underwhelming as well on that part.
Just to not bury the lead, right? This movie broke the Star Wars fandom, right, into 2 parts, and they've never reconciled in the almost 10 years since then. And one of the things that people differ about is whether or not this movie breaks new ground in terms of what Star Wars is about, right? Like kind of like you said, having a hero not be a Skywalker or not come from an important lineage, stuff like that, right? But at the same time, outside of the Skywalkers, important bloodlines are not really a thing. Right, there are no other Jedi who come from other important Jedi, or the same with the Sith, right? So I think it's way overstated about how innovative this is, right? I think if they had just given us a protagonist who is strong in the Force, personally, I think the protagonist of a Star Wars movie doesn't have to be a strong Force user, but Let's say that's what we get. And they're just somebody. And they're important based on what they do and not where they come from. I don't think anybody would have even noticed.
But it's the fact that they made a big thing about where she came from and about who her parents were, and they sort of like emphasize that in both of the movies, where I feel like they kind of sort of took a misstep. And I feel like this is kind of, signs of where you can see that they didn't really have a plan for these movies, because you've got one movie that's teasing her lineage and teasing sort of who her parents were, and then you've got the second movie that's showing that she's absolutely no one and she's not related to anyone. So there's like a massive disconnect between sort of what's set up in the first movie and what we're getting in the sort of the second movie, where they could have, if they had a better plan about sort of who she was, again, her lineage not being important and her just being a powerful Jedi coming after sort of the original trilogy, that would have been fine. I don't think people would have had as much of an issue as they did with it.
And I get that they want to build on the mystery of who she is, and I get that of course that will get us more engaged, but it's just the fashion of it, the way that they done it is, like, even with her interaction with Luke, when Luke first met her, he was like, "Who are you?" Like when he was questioning, like it felt as if he had like a thought of who she could be related to, or who she could be, or like you said, her lineage. So that's why I was like, when it came up to the fact that, like, kind of like going off what Hervé said, it did feel like they didn't plan enough on her story, because when it was revealed that she was from no one, she was just from I don't know who Kaido said her parents were, but they were like
just junk traders, just
junk traders.
So, but here's the thing, right? In the first movie, we are told her parents are somebody important, and that therefore she is important. And then she meets Luke at the start of this movie, and he asks her, "Where are you from?" And she says, "Nowhere." And he says, "No, nobody's from nowhere." She says, "I'm from Jakku," and he says, "Yeah, that's pretty much nowhere."
Yeah, that was funny.
Right? And it is kind of funny, but he's also contradicting himself, right? He's kind of acknowledging the idea that important people come from important places, and that coming from a backwater planet, even though he came from a backwater planet, right? Tatooine is just as remote as Jakku is, right? They're very similar in terms of where they grew up. He's kind of validating this idea that matters, as opposed to what she does, right? And then later on in the movie, Kylo kind of plays the same card, where he tries to tear her down by saying, "You're nobody, you're not important. What matters is where you came from and who your parents were, not what she has done as a person," right? So the movie has this constant back and forth about whether or not her identity is important. It doesn't even have a thesis about how, like, if it was simply, you are not important because of where you come from, but because of where you're going or what you do. First of all, I don't think that's profound. I think that's just basic storytelling. But also, if that had been the point, then the movie would have kind of reinforced that idea. But instead, it keeps going back and forth, often for the sake of a joke.
Nothing turning into something and moving away from the whole, like, oh, this gift is only given to, pretty much, like, for example, Luke comes from a lineage which is a very rich lineage, right? So obviously you had Anakin, who was one of the most, like, he was seen as the chosen one. So, like, the Force has always been within, like, a very notable lineage. So now that you've got someone who's from parents that are pretty much nobodies, and that nobody has turned into somebody, I understand, like, what they were trying to do with that. And like, that's why I said I was 50-50. Even though I was unsatisfied, I was 50-50 with the revelation, because I've given a reason why I didn't like it, but the reason why I can see why they did it, because it kind of does open the possibilities of finding more nobodies with the Force, which can create more stories. So that's why I was like, okay, I get it. And it's just like, and I understand, like I said, nobody actually turning into a somebody, and actually going against someone with a lineage that's that's a very notable lineage, a very powerful lineage. I get the kind of like impact that can have.
Watching the other Star Wars movies, did you ever get the impression that this is a world in which lineage is all that important? Like Luke and Anakin, obviously, there's the family connection there, right?
Yeah.
But for anybody else, did you ever get that feeling that this is a world in which that's important? There are stories like this, right? We're recording this in 2024. Dune Part 2 came out just a few months ago, and that is all about lineage and how people are connected to each other and how people are shaped by where they came from. Like, there are stories like this, right?
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling from Star Wars?
See, when you find out that Leia was Luke's sister, I was like, oh crap, she's a
There's the
Skywalker as well.
Skywalkers, clearly, right? The Skywalkers are
Exactly.
important for some reason, but
Yeah.
anybody else,
Any other lineage, no.
right?
And
So
any other
Han was
lineage,
completely self-made, right? Who else? Obi-Wan's family never comes up. None of the Jedi Masters are ever described as having come from a long lineage of Force users, whatever. So, in my view, this whole idea of we are subverting Star Wars by making the hero come from somebody who comes from nowhere, I think it's a complete smokescreen. It doesn't line up with what the rest of the movies have been telling us.
It does open the possibilities for finding more people who are strong in the Force, just like her. So do you think
to which I would say it's always been this way, right?
So you don't think they should break away from that way and do?
No, I'm saying they're not breaking away. I'm saying they're doing exactly what it has always been. Like, remember back in episode 1 when they find Anakin and realize he's strong in the Force? Nobody's surprised, right? Like they do ask about who Anakin's father is, but like this idea that you can just randomly find people who have the potential to be powerful Jedi is never treated as something unusual. Anakin is unusual because of just how powerful he is, but he's not treated as unusual because he came from nowhere. So, and I'm harping on about this because this is a really central point of the movie, right? This idea that it says it wants to critique the Jedi and the Force and all of these things, right? And it seems like, or it feels like, it's giving an alternative or breaking open the possibilities, right? And I just don't think it is. Specifically with Force potential, it's always been this way in every version of Star Wars, that it's just random, it just happens. And then with the Jedi, how do you feel about the portrayal of the Jedi and the criticism of the Jedi in this movie? Did that ring true to you, or did it come kind of out of left field?
Well, the portrayal of the Jedi there was different portrayals of the Jedi. And obviously, there was kind of he wants to end all Jedis. I was kind of confused with his reasoning behind. Obviously, of course, his anger comes from obviously Luke trying to kill him. But his reasoning for the Jedi, obviously, there's different reasons in terms of firstly, when did Luke die?
At the very end, he projected himself onto Crate. Which is the Salt Planet, where the battle was, and he projected an image of himself through the Force to distract Kylo Ren, right? And that took so much out of him because he had shut himself off from the Force for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, doing that was basically exhausted him to the point where it killed him.
Okay, I missed that because I was literally watching it. I saw him drop after he stopped projecting himself. And then it just went to the next scene, and then that's when Rhea said, "Oh, she can't feel his energy." And I was like, "Wait, whoa!" I was like, "When did this guy die?" In terms of the portrayal of the Jedi,
so we have like Luke, who is like the last Jedi, right?
And then obviously
who has tried to rebuild the Order. We see how he relates to the Force and to his legacy. We talk about the legacy of the Jedi and about it has to be destroyed or not, depending on who you talk to.
I just think in terms of the Jedi itself, I don't think there was nothing wrong with actually being a Jedi. I just think it was their personal issues that they projected and they directed towards the Jedi title to kind of like they're just directing their anger towards Jedi when they should have been directing their anger towards themselves. And I get it, of course, their decision making did come from the teachings of the Jedi. And obviously, Luke, when he nearly killed Kylo, his upbringing and obviously his training was obviously when he came from Yoda and Obi, and obviously when they detected darkness, how they reacted. So obviously he pretty much nearly followed the same footsteps but managed to stop himself. So I get that. Obviously you can he's like with religion, right? Like a lot of people blame Christianity for a lot of some of the bad things that go into the world, but then sometimes you have to ask yourselves, like for me I say, well, it's not Christianity in general, it's just the people that are practicing Christianity so they can pervert it. So I feel like a lot of the times with the Jedi thing, the individuals themselves, they were just perverting the Jedi teachings a lot of the times. And
who exactly? The Jedi in general,
like
or
for example,
Jedi?
Majority of them, like Luke, Yoda at times, because we're talking about in general, right? What we're just talking about in this movie.
Well, this movie essentially has the thesis that the Jedi need to be discarded and so on.
No, I don't think the Jedi were bad at all. Like I said, I think it was the people themselves, the way that they were. Like I said, I think they had personal issues, and they were just directing that anger towards the Jedi title. I feel like Jedi, being a Jedi comes with certain rules, and then when something bad happens, or there's some sort of conflict within yourselves, you want to blame the Jedi title. So no, I don't have. Even when Yoda came back and when Luke was trying to burn down the tree or something like that.
It was a tree that contained all the sacred Jedi texts, right? Basically, everything that was left of the old Jedi Order was on that island in that hollow tree. And Luke said, I've been convinced that the Jedi have to end. I'm going to burn it all down.
Yeah. And then Luke ended up confessing and then saying something about he didn't feel like he was good enough to teach Kylo. So like his true feelings ended up coming out. So it wasn't really the fact that, you know, he believed that the Jedi was, or he did believe that the Jedi was the cause, but at the same time, he ended up revealing what the actual problem was. So I feel like there's always an underlying issue to why people hate the Jedi. It is not really a reflection of what being an actual Jedi is.
Have the Jedi ever been shown to be hated?
They've been shown to be feared.
By who?
By the people he came up against. Remember when they went
in the very opening sequence of episode 1, right? Like people are right, but that was that being feared, or was that just, well, the Jedi are powerful and they're here to stop us and we can't stop them?
But I don't mean feared as in they were terrorizing people, but like when you're scared of like you said, like whenever people spoke on the Jedi, there was that sense of fear that came with it. They're like, oh, the Jedi are here, as in like, you know, don't mess with the Jedi.
Because they're there to stop them, right?
Yeah.
Not because they're tyrants or something like that.
Yeah. No. I don't mean in the sense of.
No, but I actually think the movie thinks this way. They actually the movie considers the Jedi to be tyrants.
Well, from who?
Just in general.
Just
because it portrays the idea that the past has to be discarded and the Jedi are broken and have to be rejected and stuff like it's seen as, like Kylo says at one point, let the past go, kill it if you have to, right?
Yeah.
So there's this aspect throughout the entire movie about the past and authority and hierarchies are broken and you have to reject them all, right? Just completely without any distinction.
Yeah.
And the Jedi are part of that, right? The Jedi are seen as this orthodoxy from the past that Luke has tried to rebuild and failed, and doing so just produced people like Kylo. So does that line up with what so you just saw all the Star Wars movies in sequence over the last 8 weeks, right? So original trilogy, prequel trilogy, does that line up? Like you've said, like we've said, the Jedi were respected and feared, and when they show up to put a stop to something, people are concerned, right? Because they're powerful. Right?
Yeah.
But did we ever see them abuse their power? Did we ever see them oppress anybody? Like they were a dysfunctional institution in the prequels, right? But that was more about themselves, right? So what I'm trying to get at is, did you think that the thesis of this movie as related to the Jedi, I think, made any sense? Like, did you say, that this checks out, finally somebody says it, or did you go like, what is this? Like, or somewhere in between?
I don't know. I didn't think too heavy into the portrayal of the Jedi. I didn't realize that.
That's like a solid hour in the middle, right?
Yeah.
This is not just an offhand comment. This is the point of the movie, right?
Well, to be fair, there was only 2 Jedis in this film, technically.
Luke and Yoda.
Well, no, Luke and Rhea. In terms of those who were alive. So
call it 2.5 with Yoda. Yeah, but they are not. Then the Jedi are not really around, right?
Yeah. The only point of view we were getting from when it comes to the Jedi being, you know, bad people pretty much was from Kylo and his freaking master. That's about it. So I can't necessarily say, they were portrayed negatively here because
a lot of it comes from Luke, right?
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah, and it does come from Luke, but like I said, I think that came from Luke because obviously he had personal issues within himself, which he ended up confessing to, and obviously the way that obviously he handled the situation with Kylo when he tried to kill him. So I understand why he thinks, you know, the Jedi is pretty much bad people because the Jedi would, like, if you was a Jedi and you were in that situation like that Luke was in when he was in front of Kylo, then I think other Jedi would probably kill him.
Why do you think that?
That's a question because obviously
Did you believe that Luke would do this? Right, like to cut to the chase, Luke is the guy who resisted the temptations of the Emperor, defeated Darth Vader not by overpowering him, but by getting through to his humanity. And then next time we see him, he has tried to rebuild the Jedi Order, failed, everybody is dead and the temple is burnt down. And the whole thing hinges on him trying to kill his nephew in his sleep because he thinks he might be falling to the dark side. You see where I'm getting at?
Yeah, but I think obviously they just did that to emphasize how dark Kylo is, to be fair.
But it's about Luke, right? Like Luke, like this portrays Luke as very, very dark, right?
Yeah.
Like Kylo is just a kid who is maybe lost and is maybe vulnerable to the influences of Snoke. But Luke is the legendary Jedi Master who has gone through things, and whose defining character trait is that he sees the good in people. And now we see him killing his nephew in his sleep.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I honestly can't get over how ridiculous that is. And that is one of those things that has really split the fandom, because some people think this is a great deconstruction of myths and legends, and Luke, in more than one instance, talks about how he was turned into a legend and the Jedi became a legend and stuff like that. And once that happens, the truth goes out the window. But I just didn't buy for 1 second that this was the same character that we saw in episode 5 and 6.
To me, it's a poorly told story, and I feel like there was a better movie in that, in terms of like, if you wanted to show the Jedi being not so perfect, I'll say the word.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to show the Jedi to be like not so perfect, this is sort of like the perfect story that you could have told, instead of going with what they went with, in terms of like having Luke sort of try to, again, like you said, like try to rebuild sort of the Jedi Order, having his nephew, which again, sort of, he's had that relationship with his father, who sort of was part of the dark side, he's managed to sort of convert to the light side at the end of sort of episode 3, and then having that potential sort of happening with his nephew, whilst showing us the influences of Snoke and what Luke actually feared potentially happening, because what we get is he was tempted by the dark side, Luke tried to kill him, basically, is what we got. But I feel like there was a more nuanced way to maybe even show that story in a full movie, in terms of showing the influences of the dark side. Again, it kind of goes back to sort of the first movie, where they played it a bit too safe, and they went with sort of a bit of a rehash of A New Hope, where again you could have shown the dark side, or sort of the First Order beginning to kind of like claw at the power and start to sort of try to replace what the Empire was, in the sort of original trilogy, and again showing Luke's fear of that. And then maybe potentially in his desperation towards the end of the movie, he's in a situation where he feels like he might have to kill his nephew. Again, that's just me kind of just like on here. But there's a better story that could have been told there, to show, again, the Jedi Order being, again, not so perfect, and Luke's character or his mythology or whatever maybe being examined a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think we've said in previous videos on this that the Jedi were very flawed, right? And I think there's room for saying, okay, what does the next generation do? Do they just rebuild the old thing that failed already? Or would they try something new? I'm just not sure that this movie tries anything new. No. Because in the end, like, Rey is just a Jedi again, right? And Luke is dead, but Rey's idea of what a Jedi is kind of very surface level, right? Like, there's this whole thing about Luke tells her being strong in the Force is not just about lifting rocks. And then at the end of the day, she saves the day by lifting rocks, literally. And right? Yeah. So, and that's like this movie in a nutshell, right? Because they constantly make these big statements and then they walk them back immediately. And it's not just Rey, it's a bunch of other places too, right? Where they talk about how you shouldn't, like, if you just keep fighting the bad guys, that turns you into bad guys, but then they win in the end in a big battle and stuff like that.
But guys, the Jedi, like, because we keep talking about the Jedi Order, right? But in this film, even in the title, The Last Jedi, the Jedi Order is pretty much non-existent. Like, the only one that is left is, like we said, is Luke and Yoda. That's his spirit. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So before, we had more to go off on when it comes to critiquing the Jedi and just speaking about the Jedi. But in this one, can we kind of like use this as pretty much the thing that kind of destroyed the story? Because I don't think that's not fair, but I don't think we can use something. I actually think this point is kind of like, it shouldn't be such a big thing. It shouldn't be such a big reasoning as to why this film failed. Because the Jedi Order is pretty, like, the only time that the Jedi Order is actually conveyed is with obviously Luke's training between Rey.
And also that it produced Kylo Ren and that it ended in flames and Luke went into exile not having accomplished pretty much anything, right? Like, much like Han last movie, he has not accomplished anything in 30 years. He's very much stagnated and he's not accomplished anything, and he's very much at his worst. So we've talked a lot about the Jedi, right? And this movie is full of stuff, and that we could do 5 hours on this, right? One of the big parts of this movie is that it constantly keeps attacking Star Wars, right? In the sense of critiquing the legacy of the heroes that we know from previous stories and the Jedi and the Force and all of these concepts. But then it walks it back immediately and then just does the obvious thing, right? Like it still ends in a big lightsaber fight, in a big battle, and Rey is just a Jedi in the end. She's not a better version of the Jedi. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't seem to go anywhere in that sense. It keeps trying to do both things at the same time, where it tries to subvert Star Wars, but then it has to be Star Wars. And those two things exist in the same movie. I think that just breaks the movie in general. Because it ends up not like it's 2.5 hours or going almost 3 hours of stuff that kind of goes in all different directions at all the same time, but it never actually covers any ground. That's kind of my takeaway from it.
I agree with that point. Firstly, let me just say that I didn't necessarily think this movie was a bad movie for me. I do think it was definitely one of the worst in terms of out of all the films I've seen. But I wouldn't say it was a bad movie. I'd probably give it like a 6.
Like why? Like what works about it?
Besides the lightsabers and the entertainment value, in Act 3.
It looks pretty. I think it's the best looking Star Wars movie of all of them. Mm-hmm. Right? But is that enough?
Do you know how I would describe it? Like, and this is very much the feeling that I had watching the movie originally, and sort of again rewatching it as well. It's fast food. Like the idea of it, and while you're sort of having it, it seems fine.
But it's constantly telling you it's a 5-star steak.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. but then, sorry. The point I was going to get onto is that it feels like it's like kind of like great at the time, but then the more you think about it and the more you feel it afterwards, you kind of start to pick out all the holes in it, and then sort of by the end of it, you kind of feel not angry at the film, but you just like start to like dislike it more and more because of like everything that you start to sort of uncover in the movie. You know, we touched on obviously, you know, how they sort of portray the Jedi and sort of how they critiqued it. We talked about sort of Rey's lineage. For me, one of the biggest issues I had was Snoke in the movie and how it was made to be the sort of this big threat, and then by the end of it, we really don't learn anything about him, and he's taken out in the most lamest way possible.
Actually, I want to use my soapbox to come to the defense of Snoke, because I actually think this is one of the few things that I think is okay. There was a lot of speculation before this movie came out about who Snoke was and what his plan was and whether he was going to be the new emperor and whether or not he was going to be the big bad, essentially. And I don't think he has to be. I think he just has to make something interesting happen. And if he is the one who turned Kylo Ren to the dark side, and then Kylo kills him because that's what a Sith does to complete his training, I think that's enough. He himself doesn't have to be all that interesting. But they did build him up as a big mystery, and he ends up not doing very much. And I'm saying he doesn't have to, but then something else has to happen. Right? Something else has to be compelling about it.
Yeah, he was just pretty much the vehicle to Kylo Ren's story, in a way.
And this movie is full of kind of false misdirects and false subversions. But kind of the misdirect of you assume Snoke is the big bad, but then he's just the catalyst to create the villain, which is Kylo Ren. I think that's fine. If it was in a better movie, right, where then an actual story happened. But I'm just saying that basic point of Snoke was nobody important. I think it's fine. Like, he kind of fills the power vacuum after the Emperor is dead and there is no top dark side users. So some guy comes along and takes a stab at it, right? I think that's okay. But it had to be followed up by an actual story, which we didn't get.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just super underwhelming. And again, I feel like a lot of sort of the issues with like Rey and like stuff like that was that in between part, the 2 years of speculation, because again, it's the movies teasing and telling you that, you know, these things are important, or, you know, there's some big reveal that you're sort of due to get in the next movie, and then it just didn't come. And I feel like it was just, it felt cheap, and it felt like subversion for the sake of subversion, as opposed to...
Absolutely, yeah. Like, this movie gave the idea of subverting expectations a bad name, right? Like, it's infamous for kind of ruining the idea, right?
Yeah.
I think, you hit it on the head, that kind of part of why this movie was so poorly received is that Episode 7 spent so much time on building up mysteries and planting questions and starting a story, and then this movie comes along and kind of burns it all down on purpose and is having fun with it. But those two don't fit together, right? I think individually each one is okay. I think they're both pretty weak and pretty uninteresting, but those two put together I think each bring out the worst qualities in the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because now we have a first movie that focuses on asking questions, and then the movie that's supposed to answering them makes fun of you for trying to answer them. That's just a strange strategy in general, and I don't think it works at all.
But I don't have a strategy, and like that's currently the biggest issue with Star Wars at the moment, with the sequel trilogy and anything that's come afterwards, is that they haven't put any thought behind it. It's just make Star Wars for the sake of making Star Wars without really having a plan. And again, you don't have to be the MCU and plan out the next 10 years, but if you're going to tell a trilogy, at least understand where you want to start the trilogy and where you want to end the trilogy, and also key beats that you want to have happen throughout the movies.
And the original trilogy wasn't planned either.
Right? No.
That was completely made up on the spot as they went along, right? Like George Lucas did not. I'm sure he claimed at some point that he did, but George Lucas claims a lot of things. But as far as I know, they made one movie at a time, and they didn't have a master plan. But they built on what came before, and almost everything lines up.
Yeah.
Right. If you watch episode 4, 5, and 6 in sequence, there are little details that don't quite make sense. Right. Famously, the romance between Luke and Leia, who are then retconned into being brother and sister, are a bit weird. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if that was planned from the start, that would have been a weird choice. But it's there because it wasn't planned from the start. So that shows you can tell a story that is a kind of improvised. But as long as you build on what came before and you are a team player essentially in how you tell the story, I think it can work. And this shows the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm. But did you say Leia and Luke wasn't planned in terms of them being brothers?
No, in terms of them being siblings, no, it wasn't. The first movie very much foreshadows they kiss, right?
What the flip?
But remember, I think at the time I even asked you, like, where do you think this goes? And you thought,
I thought
this was like they were going to have a romance, like we're going to come get together, right? And like, there's nothing in the movie that suggests that they are supposed to be siblings, right? Mm. And that's a case where that's one of the details you kind of have to roll with if you want to enjoy the original trilogy, right? But here you have to ignore everything, right? There's nothing that builds on each other. And I think the reason The Last Jedi is so infamous in the franchise is because it isn't just a not very good second chapter in the trilogy. It actually deliberately and very thoroughly undermined everything that came before it and everything that comes after it. Right, because it doesn't add anything really. It just delights in tearing things down. Right, the Jedi, like Luke's legacy and accomplishments. Every villain in this is a joke. Like we didn't even get to that. Right, Hux is made into a complete idiot when he should be one of the big villains. Like there's so much we could talk about in this movie, but like this is primarily about what does this look like to somebody with fresh eyes, and I don't know. I think we've covered kind of the core of what this movie is, and we don't need to do there have been thousands and thousands of hours of analysis of tear apart every scene. Like we haven't talked about Holdo and her kamikaze maneuver, and the whole thing about how she's a terrible leader at every step of the way, but then Poe is kind of played as a chump for being a Star Wars character, but then in the end she saves the day by doing a reckless piloting maneuver. So it's again this constant back and forth, right? It's like a dog on a leash and it keeps running back and forth, but it never goes anywhere, right? So I think that's this movie in a nutshell.
See, after hearing what you have to say, I get
it's like I'm not telling you what to think, right? I'm like the whole point of the series is like to get the fresh impression. Did feel like to you like you're watching the same movie, like the same series of movies with the same characters and the same world?
What I was gonna say was, I'm gonna answer your question. What I was gonna say was, the reason why I didn't think this was a bad movie was because just to simply put it, I wasn't bored. I do think that in terms of like the entertainment value, it's there. Especially like the action scenes and the chase scenes. It was definitely there. In terms of the story itself,
the slow speed chase scenes that breaks every rule about how Star Wars spaceships work.
Which scene?
The slow motion space chase where the rebellion is being chased by the First Order, and because they're going at the same speed, they are stationary in space.
Okay.
And that is not how Star Wars space battles work. Star Wars space battles are basically World War II fighter pilots and fighter planes and big Navy ships. That's how they work, right? But this is, in a strange way, too scientifically accurate. Because The Expanse did a scene exactly like this, and it was riveting, where it was just two ships hanging in space, like in a black void. It was the most intense thing ever. But that's because the show had spent like 4 seasons building up, like setting the rules and teaching audiences what to expect. And then the payoff was this high-speed chase that looks like they were just hanging in space. But here they try to do the same thing. Like, they're not copying The Expanse, right? This came years before that. But they broke all the rules for how ships should behave in Star Wars, and just expected the audience to go with it. And about half the audience did go with them, and another half didn't. And that is really, I think, what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, like I said, for me, like I said, I just wasn't bored. I think that in terms of like entertainment value, in terms of the story itself, like I said, I had issues, especially like with the understanding what the hell the Force actually was, and the revelation of Rhea. So there was like issues that I did have with the story itself, but in terms of like the entertainment factor to it, I wasn't bored. There was sometimes I did zone out. Yes, I do agree, but like I said, Act 3 for me was a good act besides the revelation of Rhea, but still, like I said, I wasn't bored. I was entertained to a degree, and yeah, so I think I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. But like I said, it was one of the worst. It might be the worst. Maybe it was one. I'm just trying to think of if there was any other Star Wars films which I didn't like. Maybe it was the worst out of all the films that I have seen so far. But yeah, it wasn't bad though, for me. It wasn't bad. It was definitely above average, borderline good. Cool.
Famous last words.
Oh, okay.
You're defending The Last Jedi on the internet.
Yeah.
Let's see how that goes for you.
Wait. Wish me luck. Wait, is there one more after this?
There's one more, yes. So there's
which they really need to wrap up Rhea's story, because it still kind of feels like she's not to bash her, but it kind of does feel like I don't know what the hell her motivation is, because before obviously it was what to be fair, I don't even know what her motivation is, because when Kylo said you've always known who your parents were, then what the hell has her motivation been this whole time then?
Doesn't seem to line up with anything that came before, does it?
Yeah, so I think they really need to wrap up her story in the next one, which is something which I'm looking, because throughout this film now, throughout her stories, like it feels very like it just feels unfinished. Like, I don't know what the hell her purpose was. Each main character had a purpose, but with her, I don't even know what the hell she's like. Is she just going with the flow type ish? Like, I don't know what it is that she's doing.
The next movie is called The Rise of Skywalker. What do you make of that?
The Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
Considering all the Skywalkers are dead at the moment.
Yeah. So the hell? Did she end up getting married and pregnant by Kylo or something?
Well, I mean, this movie kind of sets that up, right? Or at least like a connection between them.
Yeah.
Like they try to kind of defect for a while, and until they become enemies again.
Mm.
Yeah. So any predictions? Like it has to be about the conclusion of Rey's journey, right? What do you have any ideas what that might be?
I'm laughing because you have no clue what's going to come in the next one.
maybe either Kylo Ren dies.
Like let's say you are a big shot Hollywood director, right? And Rian Johnson has just produced this thing, and Lucasfilm panics and says, "Hey, can you fix this for us? What do we do?" Like you have completely free reign, but you have to make a commercially viable Star Wars movie that comes after The Last Jedi. What do you do?
They even have enough balls to take this job. I don't think.
They promise you $1 billion.
Yeah. I'd say find a way to make Rey's story make sense, as in maybe okay.
I think that's an answer in itself.
Yeah.
Maybe so what I think that's gonna happen. So there's two things that are gonna happen. Kylo Ren's gonna die, and then she's gonna go off on her own journey and wander wherever. Or, which I don't think is gonna happen, she manages to bring Kylo Ren to the light. They end up getting married, and then they have a child, and then the Skywalker lineage continues. Kylo's technically a Skywalker, so I don't think that's gonna happen. But I think But I'm still trying to figure out how, like, so if that doesn't happen, he comes over to her light, and then they get married and they have a child. So who the hell is this? Leia still exists,
She died.
oh
No, the
yeah,
character-
no, she
the
didn't.
character
She
lived.
didn't.
So not to get too macabre, but Carrie Fisher died shortly after this movie came out.
Oh,
So
damn.
she cannot be in the next movie.
Oh man,
Wait, she didn't die in this movie, did she?
no, she didn't.
The character lives,
Oh yeah.
but Carrie Fisher died I think before this movie even came out. So there's no more Leia.
Okay, well then I don't know how, unless all the Skywalker spirits come back, and
Nobody is ever really gone.
yeah, but it's saying the rise of Skywalker. So maybe there's gonna be one final battle where it's Rey and Kylo, and then all the
All the
spirits of the
Skywalkers
Skywalkers
come
are
back and
behind them.
fight all the Sith ever.
Is that it?
All the Skywalkers come back as Force ghosts. Like
Yeah.
that scene in Lord of the Rings where all the ghosts appear behind Aragorn, and then all the Skywalkers charge in with their spirit lightsabers.
I can't even say yes because I don't even remember Lord of the Rings. I think I probably watched the first one so many years ago, so I don't even know that reference. But let me just say yes.
Sure.
Well, yeah, I have no idea what's gonna happen in this one. I think all the spirits, I just think maybe all the spirits are gonna come back and obviously be behind Rhea when she's against Kylo.
We'll hold you to that prediction.
Yeah, cool. I would love to see your face on the opening scroll when the Rise of Skywalker starts. I would love to see your face.
Wait, is it gonna be that bad?
Oh, it's just an interesting.
It is something.
It's something. It's something. Yeah, it's something. Anyways, yeah. Let me not say too much. We'll discuss next week.
Next week we have the epic conclusion to your journey through the Star Wars universe. So I'm looking forward to that one. So we could talk about this movie for another 5 hours, right? But I think we've said our piece. How do you want to do your thing?
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. If you are a defender of The Last Jedi, like Jonathan is, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you are a hater of it, let us know in the comments why you hate The Last Jedi and if you agreed with our points on it.
Alright, guys. Don't kill me too much in the comments, but we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.